again. It's a redskin.
So today's topic is function. We have already used function. Like you have already learned that if we have a list like this and if I want to find the minimum number from this list, then we can write min, and within parentheses we need to pass the list, that is a. Now let me print this minimum number. So it will print -4 because -4 is the minimum number. So let me execute this code. So it is showing -4. Now here min is the inbuilt function and it helps us to find the minimum number from a list. Now the point is it reduces our work because to find the minimum number we need not to write the code from scratch. Or we can say that functions are very much useful and it runs only when we call that function. Like the code for min function is already written internally. Now the question is how we can use this function or how we can define a function from our own purpose. For example, we have to add all the values of a list multiple times in our program. So it is better to write a function instead of writing the code from scratch multiple times, unless it will make our code lengthy. And also assume that we don't have the sum function. Actually, we have a sum function, or we have an inbuilt function called sum. And if I write this function and then if we pass a in this parenthesis, then it will calculate the sum of the element of this list a. And now let me print it, and if I execute this code, so it is showing the sum of this element, that is 70. But for this moment forget about this sum function and keep it in your mind that we need to write this function from scratch and we don't have this function sum. Okay, first of all we need to write def. Actually def is a keyword which is used to define a function. Then we need to give a function name. You can give any name. Here I am giving my sum, like my sum. And then within parentheses we need to pass the value or the list on which we want to apply this function, but we don't know the list name, so here we need to pass a formal argument. You can pass any name in this parenthesis. In our case I am passing x, and now onwards you can use this x instead of actual list name, and we will pass the actual list while calling the function, and then give a colon like this, and within this function body we need to write the code which will calculate the sum from a list. Now we need to declare a variable like s equals to 0 to store the sum, and then let me run a for loop over this list x, like for I in x. Now in the each iteration I is going to store the each value of this list x. So for example we have a list like this, and in the first iteration the value of I will be 1, and then 5, then 3, like this. So in the each iteration let me add the value of I with the present value of s, like s equals to s plus I, like this. So in the first iteration the value of s will be 0 and the value of I will be 1, so 0 plus 1 will be 1. And in the next iteration the value of s will be 1 and the value of I will be 5, so it will add 1 plus 5, and now the value of s will be 6. So in the third iteration the value of s will be 6 and the value of I will be 3, so it will add 6 plus 3, that is 9, and in this way we can calculate the sum of these elements. And at the end of this iteration let me return the sum, that is s, like this. So this is our function, and to test this function we need to create a list. So let me copy it, and then a equals to this list, and now we are going to call this function, that is my sum, and then within parentheses we need to pass the list name on which we are going to implement this function. So here let me pass a, and then it will return the sum like this. So it will return a sum or a integer number, and we need to store it in another variable like b equals to this, and then let me print b, like print. So this is our function declaration, and then this is our function calling. Now let me execute this code. So it is showing our expected output, that is 70. So the sum of these numbers is 70. So the parameters that we pass at the time of function declaration are known as formal arguments. So in our case, x is the formal argument, and the arguments that we pass at the time of function calling are known as actual arguments. So a is the actual argument. Our next topic is local variable. The variables that are declared within a function is known as local variables. The scope of this type of variables is within that particular function only. So let me declare a function def myFun, and here I'm not going to operate on any value, so here I'm not going to pass any argument. So let me just declare a local variable like a equals to 10. So a is the local variable, and then let me print the value of a, that is 10, like this. And then this is all about our function, and out of this function let me call this a. So a is a local variable, so it will works only within this function. When we call this function like myFun, and if I just let me just call it, and whenever we call this function like myFun, then only it will print the value of a, that is 10. But at the outside of this function, if I try to access this a, then it will raise an error because a is a local variable and it is not accessible from the outside of this function. So let me execute this code. So here note that when we call this function that is myFun, so it is printing the value of a, that is 10, because within this function a is accessible because a is a local variable of this function myFun. But outside of this function, if I try to access this value that is a equals to 10, then it is showing like name a is not defined. So this is the concept of local variable. Our next topic is global variable. Global variable means we can access it from inside of a function, and also we can access it from outside of a function. Like if I declare a equals to 10, then we can access this a from inside of any function, and also we can access it outside of any function. Like if we have a function like define myFun, and within this function I'm going to access this variable a like inside, and then let me print the value of a like this. And now we need to call this function, because unless we call it, it will not execute. And then I'm going to access this variable from outside of this function myFun, like print outside and now I want to print the value of a outside of this function. So let me execute this code. So it is fine, like inside within this function we can access this value of a, that is 10, and also in the outside we can access this value of a, that is 10. But here one problem is, if I declare a global variable and a local variable with same name, then the problem will occur. If we try to print the value of a local variable, then it will be fine. Like here we have a global variable, and inside this function I'm going to create a local variable with same name like a equals to 20. So a equals to 20 is a local variable and a equals to 10 is the global variable. And inside this function I want to print the value of local variable like local, and outside of this function I'm trying to print the value of global variable like global. So in this case it will works fine. Like if I print it, execute this code, so it is showing local variable that is 20 and it is showing the global variable that is 10. So in this case it is fine. But if I try to print the value of this global variable that is 10 inside this function, then also it will going to print the value of the local variable that is 20. Like if I write global, and now let me execute this code. Okay, so it is showing the local variable value that is 20 within this function. So what will be the solution if I try to access the global variable that is 10 within this function when the value of the name of the global and local variable is same? So in this case we need to use the global function. So first of all let me change it global to local. So in this function it will first print the value of the local variable that is equals to 20, and in the next line let me use globals function to print the value of the global variable. That is, we need to first write globals and within square bracket, and within this square bracket we need to pass the value of the name of the global variable, that is a, within quotation like this, and now it will return the value of the global variable, that is equals to 10, and let me store it in x, and then let me print it, like let me copy it and pass here x, and it is global. So within this function it will first print the local variable, that is equals to 10, and then it is going to print the global variable, that is x, that is equals to 10. And outside of this function we can only access the global variable, we can't access this local variable. So let me execute this code. So it is first printing the local variable, that is 10, and then it is showing the global variable inside this function, and then outside of this function we can only access the global variable, that is equals to 10. So this is how we can access the value of the global variable inside this function when we have a local variable with the same name. Now my next question is, can we access this local variable outside of this function or not, or what we can do whenever we need to access this local variable. To understand it, let's take a example, like we are going to take the input from the user, like input, and within parentheses let me pass the message, enter your age, like this, print your age is, and also we are trying to access this local variable from outside of this function, like this. Let me remove it and let me run this code. So here note that within this function we can easily access this local variable, that is your age is 20. So it is showing your age is 20. But outside of this function, whenever we try to access this age, that is a, it is showing error, like name a is not defined. So what will be the solution if I try to access this age outside of this function? To do that, we need to first declare a as global variable, like by using this global keyword, like global and then a. So from now onwards a will behave like a global variable. So let me execute this code. So here note that it is showing your age is 28 within this myfun function, and also we can access this value of age outside of this function. So this is all for this video.